Solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Completing the square is a method that we use to solve quadratic equations, but it's best suited for equations where a is equal to 1 and b is an even number. So how do we complete the square when we have an expression like x squared plus bx? Right? So here you could see that a is a 1, right, the coefficient in front of the x squared, and b, let's assume, is an even number. So what we do is we add half of the coefficient of x, right? We add half of b squared to each side of the equation. And that's it. Let's go ahead and take a look at an example, because that's a bit of a fuzzy description. So here we're trying to find the term that should be added to the expression to create a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so here's our first example. It's x squared minus 4x. Here a is 1 and b is negative 4. And so how do we figure out what to add to both sides of the equation, if we had an equation, so that we can create a perfect square trinomial, so we can factor it, so we can solve it? Well, we would add b over 2 squared. So we would add negative 4 divided by 2 squared. Negative 2 divided by 4 is negative 2. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, and squared is positive 4. So we would add 4 to both sides. We would add 4 to this expression to create a perfect square. Okay. And so what about this one over here, example 2? What would we add to x squared plus 6 to make it a perfect square trinomial? Well, we would first identify our a and our b. So our a is 1 and our b is 6. And so what would we add to this expression to make it a perfect square trinomial? We would add b divided by 2 squared. So we would add b divided by 2 squared, which is equal to 6 divided by 2 squared, which is equal to 3 squared, which is equal to 9. So if we added 9 here and it was x squared plus 6x plus 9, it's a perfect square trinomial. And how is a perfect square? Well, the first term is a perfect square, the 9 is a perfect square, and the center term, the second term, is 2 times a times b. It's 2 times x times 3, right? It's 6x. So we have a perfect square trinomial, and we would be able to factor it. All right. So let's look at example 3, and then we'll get into how to actually use it to solve quadratic equations. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look here. We have our a is 1, our b is negative 10, and so what do we need to add to this expression in order to create a perfect square trinomial? We would need to add b over 2 squared. So that's equal to negative 10 over 2 squared. That's equal to negative 5 squared. That's equal to 25. Okay. So if we added 25 here, it'd be x squared minus 10x plus 25. The first term is a perfect square, the third term is a perfect square, and the middle term is 2 times a times b, right? That is true. So yeah, we'll go ahead and talk about how to use this with real examples